This right here is when life peaked. It ain't gonna get much better than this, says 10-year-old Milky. It's all pretty much downhill from here, fellas. They just don't make the Lon milk like they used to. Or do they? I guess we'll have to find out. So before I start this quick little comparison between arguably two of the most infamous Zelda titles and the two that personally mean the most to me, first I have to explain the motivation behind this video. If you've seen any of my other Zelda videos, I've briefly mentioned how my grandpa and I played Ocarina of Time together from like the ages of 7 to 10, and it might not have even been 3 years, that might just be my childhood goldfish brain time perception, but it felt like a long time. Which is totally okay with me because I enjoyed every single second that we played this game. I vividly remember standing on Death Mountain Trail looking down at the distant Kakariko village while hearing that stupid cow that Impa's keeping hostage moo all night long. That specific memory just brings back the feeling of awe and scale that I felt while playing this game. I had never felt anything like it up to this point. I couldn't fathom the fact that I was looking at a town that I was just in 5 minutes ago from a distant vantage point, and I walked here with my controller. It wasn't like I loaded in or walked through a door and waited 3 minutes for load times to go through. No, I just walked up a hill and now I'm looking at where I just was. Now, brace yourself for some Milky lore, just bear with me for a sec. I'm originally from Iowa, and my grandparents lived in the country off of a gravel road, and at least once or twice a month, my mom, dad, sister, and I also had twin brothers, but they weren't around yet, would drive up there for the day, and I would usually just end up spending the weekend there after they left. And that meant lots of hours of Ocarina of Time, Super Mario 64, GoldenEye, and Diddy Kong Racing were about to be played. Movies that I probably shouldn't have been watching were about to be watched, and thank goodness for that, otherwise I wouldn't be such a cultured connoisseur of film. And lots of snacks were about to be snacked on. We had a dedicated gaming snack, which was to cut up some summer sausage, Colby Jack cheese, pepper jack if we were feeling wild, kettle chips, and Pepsi in a red Solo cup. Specifically, out of red Solo cup, stay with me here, it tasted better that way, trust me. And if it wasn't that, it was cheese dip also with kettle chips and Pepsi out of a red Solo cup. And we kept this whole tradition for years. Every time a new Zelda game came out, he would buy it, and I would come up and play it with him while my grandma watched us for hours. He even went out and bought a Wii just so we could play Twilight Princess. There was no other game that we were interested in except for Super Mario Galaxy, which we really didn't care about until we played it, and man, masterpiece, but that's besides the point. We would go on to play Majora's Mask, Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword when it released, Breath of the Wild, and Age of Calamity if you want to count that as a game. Which, this might be a hot take, but I actually really enjoyed Age of Calamity. At least for the first 10 hours or so, and then it got a little repetitive, but for that first 10 hours, man, loved it. This was our tradition from the ages of around 7 all the way to 20 years old. Well, yesterday, at the time of writing the script, my mom called me with news that I've always dreaded but knew it would inevitably happen someday. That news being that my grandpa had unfortunately passed away. He told my mom minutes before passing that all he wanted was for me to know that he was proud of me and proud to be my grandpa and for me not to feel sad, which obviously I'm gonna feel sad. My grandpa was truly one of my best friends, and the Zelda franchise has played a massive part in that. That was our thing. If we weren't outside or working on a project or watching a movie, we were playing Zelda. I was the actual player because he didn't like to use the controller and could never figure it out, and he was the idea giver and the puzzle solver. My grandparents' house actually burnt down a couple years ago, and luckily I took the Nintendo 64 and all of the games, even the Nintendo Power Guidebook before that happened. If I could have saved anything out of that house, it would have been that and something of my grandma's to remember her by. For me, Twilight Princess and Ocarina of Time are more than just games, it's hundreds of hours of memories and quality time spent with my grandparents. And that Nintendo 64 is currently hooked up to my TV, and I'm planning to play through both Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess again. Please Nintendo, give us a remake for Twilight Princess for the Switch too, but this time they're gonna be in his honor. As I navigate these vast landscapes, I'll remember the countless hours we spent together, the snacks we shared, the laughter, and the puzzle-induced frustration that filled the room. This video is dedicated to him and our incredible journey through the Zelda franchise. A tribute to a bond that transcended the 4.3 aspect ratio screen that brought it to life. This video is for him, our story, and our history with the Zelda franchise. And you bet your sweet donut hole I'm absolutely going to unashamedly glaze the ever-living Deku nuts out of these games. So here's to you, Grandpa. Thank you for being my hero of time, for filling my childhood with joy, snacks, and rated R films, and for sharing your love with The Legend of Zelda with me. Now, with all of that sappiness out of the way, Which one is better? Is one better? Well, it's time to find out. Released in 1998 for the Nintendo 64, Ocarina of Time was groundbreaking in its approach to game design and storytelling. It introduced a 3D world that felt alive with a vast landscape filled with secrets and rich lore. Man, do I miss the days when Nintendo equally prioritized story along with gameplay. I don't care what anybody says. I know a lot of people say that Ocarina of Time story isn't that deep, but you know what? I don't care. It is. Although yes, it is a fairly simple, straightforward story, it is the hero's journey done to near perfection. Players stepped into the shoes of Link, a young hero on a quest to save the land of Hyrule from an evil man from the desert, Ganondorf. The game set a new standard for adventure games, combining exploration, puzzle solving, and combat in a way that engaged players on multiple levels. The game essentially invented Z-targeting, which would go on to be used for years even in current games. For me personally, playing Ocarina of Time was about more than just the gameplay. It was a shared experience with my grandpa that forged a deep bond with me, which is admittedly a little bit unfair for this comparison video because I am slightly biased towards Ocarina of Time for this reason, but I'll try my best to give legitimate reasons for my opinions here. As we navigated through dungeons and solved intricate puzzles, he became not only my gaming partner but also a mentor. He would guide me through tough spots, always encouraging me to think creatively and to explore every nook and cranny of Hyrule. And man, do I mean every nook and cranny. Oh my god, I remember discovering that walking through walls was a mechanic in the Shadow Temple, and for some reason, I'd still try to walk through every single wall just in case my lens of truth wasn't malfunctioning or something, or if the developers decided to put a hidden wall somewhere. And if you know Zelda, you know that that's not out of the realm of possibility, but it was really probably just my early onset of OCD, but you know, that's besides the point. I vividly remember the thrill of discovering a hidden treasure, a heart piece, a new item, a side quest, a new enemy, or solving a particularly tricky puzzle together. Something Ocarina of Time did extremely well was creating a Hyrule that felt vast and open, especially for its time. It pretty much felt like an open world game, with key locations like Kokiri Forest, Gerudo Valley, Zora's Domain, Hyrule Castle Town, and Lake Hylia feeling distinct and memorable. I genuinely don't think that I can think of another game or locations where I can go back years later in my memory, close my eyes, and pretty much walk through the locations to a T. I mean, that is an insane feat, and I don't have that good of a memory. All of these locations make a return in Twilight Princess, apart from the Lost Woods, at least in name, with many believing that the Sacred Grove is just a separated location within the Lost Woods, and some believing that Ordon Village is actually Kokiri Forest, but I'm not Zeltic, okay? I'm not even gonna go into that. Twilight Princess has a larger and more detailed Hyrule with a greater sense of realism, offering more areas to explore, locations that feel more alive and full with many side quests, characters, and architecture. When it comes to creating a vast world, in my opinion, Twilight Princess takes it just for the simple fact that there's just so much more landscape to explore. However, I also feel that the increase in size also makes the overworld feel a bit emptier than Ocarina of Time's more compact and engaging world. I mean, at least in the sense of like traveling from one location to another in Twilight Princess sometimes feels a little bit empty, but then I look at Hyrule Field and Ocarina of Time now and I'm just rolling around for 20 minutes trying to get to the next place and I'm like, man, this is kinda empty. As we look back on the legacy of Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess, no matter my opinion on either game, they're not just games that have stood the test of time. They're a timeless portal to my childhood. In Ocarina of Time, the lessons learned through Link's journey resonate deeply within me, even more so to this day. Themes of courage, friendship, and the passage of time mirror my own experiences growing up, especially the invaluable lessons imparted by my grandpa. Even now, as I prepare for another playthrough in his honor, I know that the game serves as a bridge between us. It embodies our shared love for adventure and the joy of discovery, and it reminds me that he will always be a part of my journey through life and every new Zelda adventure that I embark on. I know I'm not the only one that shares that sentiment with this game, not even close. You might not share the exact same experience, but this game has had such a huge impact on so many people's lives, it's almost crazy. I don't think there's any other piece of media that I can hear a single note from a song or a single frame from a landscape and immediately be transported back to my 10-year-old self, apart from maybe another Zelda game. And this may be a dramatic statement, but I would say honestly that Ocarina of Time is basically the Lord of the Rings of gaming. The Lord of the Rings being my favorite trilogy of all time, I truly believe that fantasy cinema peaked with those films, and I really don't think I'll ever experience anything like it again. The Critical Drinker has a very well made video about why the Lord of the Rings will never be topped, so I'll put the link to his video in the description. I mean, the Ride of the Rohirrim scene in Return of the King, King Theoden's speech as they prepare to charge head-on into what seems to be certain death, genuinely might be the best piece of cinema in the history of films. That and the T-Rex breakout scene from Jurassic Park, but two very different types of great, I know, bear with me. I'm a nerd, okay? Ocarina of Time not only captivated players, but also revolutionized the gaming industry in profound ways. Many of those revolutions would be seen and improved upon in Twilight Princess and many other games. As one of the first major 3D action-adventure games, it introduced innovative gameplay mechanics, redefined narrative storytelling, and set new standards for world building and player interaction. We truly had never seen anything like this up to this point. The legacy of Ocarina of Time continues to influence game design, making it a cornerstone in the evolution of video games. One of the most significant contributions of Ocarina of Time was its pioneering approach to 3D gameplay. Prior to its release, the transition from 2D to 3D presented unique challenges for game developers. Ocarina of Time expertly navigated these challenges with the introduction of the Z-targeting system, as I briefly mentioned earlier, allowing players to lock onto enemies and objects. This mechanic transformed combat and exploration, providing a more fluid and intuitive experience. Sure, it may not have been perfect, the camera system was a bit clunky, but for a first shot at something completely new, it went about as perfectly as it could have. As a result, the game laid the groundwork for future action-adventure titles, influencing mechanics that became staples in later games such as Dark Souls, Shadow of the Colossus, Skyrim, and many more. Naturally, Twilight Princess also uses Z-targeting, although much more defined and fluid to use than it was in its predecessor. And it really is a shame that Nintendo doesn't prioritize story anymore, because both Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess's narrative depth were pretty groundbreaking for their time, especially Ocarina just because it was an earlier game. Ocarina's structure, which spans two distinct timelines, allowed players to witness the consequences of their actions across generations. This emphasis on storytelling set a new benchmark for narrative design in video games, encouraging developers to create richer, more immersive narratives in their own projects. To this day, walking out of the Temple of Time 7 years later and seeing the current state of Castletown is one of the most jarring moments in media I've ever experienced. I don't know how they did it. I don't know if it was just because I was a kid, but I seriously felt the impact of seeing the once joyful, colorful world I knew as a kid turn into a dark, desolate wasteland filled with re-deads, with the ominous silhouette of Ganondorf's castle looming above Castletown. It really felt like I had been gone for 7 years. The friends I once knew were nowhere to be seen. And it is really a genius game design decision when you really think about it on the developer's part to make Castletown such a happy, colorful, musical place, because the first thing you see when you walk out of the Temple of Time 7 years later is that one super happy place, and the stark contrast between what it was then and what it is now totally shifts the tone of the game. And it totally diverts your expectations because you're just excited to be an adult. I mean, you're a kid playing this game and now you're all of a sudden an adult in the game, so you're excited to use your new cool Master Sword and go take on the world and be a hero. And then you walk outside and you're like, oh, okay. The world of Hyrule itself was another remarkable achievement, presenting an expansive and varied environment, encouraging exploration and discovery. Unlike many games of its time, which often featured a strict linear progression, Ocarina of Time for the most part allowed players to explore the world at their own pace, while maintaining enough restriction and linearity to keep its sense of story progression. This sense of freedom encouraged player agency and curiosity, elements that had become essential in modern open-world game design, albeit almost too much in my opinion with certain games. Additionally, the integration of music as a gameplay element was a revolutionary feature and has since been used as a mechanic in multiple entries to the series. The use of the ocarina, which players used to play through simple melodies, served as both a narrative device and a gameplay mechanic. Songs had practical effects, such as changing the weather or teleporting Link, reconnecting with childhood friends, or even bringing joy to a grumpy Goron, creating a unique blend of music and interaction. This innovative approach to music and gaming highlighted the emotional and thematic potential of sound, influencing how future games would incorporate audio into their design, and not to mention an absolute game changer of a soundtrack, which to this day still easily holds its own against modern games and movies alike. We'll compare both soundtracks later in the video. I swear, older games just had better soundtracks than modern games, and I actually have a theory as to why that is. I feel that the graphical limitations of earlier consoles made it difficult to create convincing and memorable atmospheres with visuals alone, hence using sound design and music to fill that gap. And yes, there are obviously modern games with banger soundtracks, but they seem few and far between, often prioritizing visuals over music. The game also set a standard for quality in the gaming industry because the game's critical and commercial success demonstrated that games could achieve the same level of artistic and narrative sophistication as films and literature. This realization inspired a generation of developers to pursue ambitious projects that prioritize storytelling, design, and player experience. When my grandpa and I finally finally finished Ocarina of Time, it was a monumental moment for both of us. This journey that we had been on for literally years was finally over, and it was really a sad time in my life. Seeing Navi fly away and Link getting sent back to the past to relive his childhood was the first time I had ever really had an emotional response to a video game, and it was truly one of the best experiences I've ever had. Yet, it was far from over. My introduction to Twilight Princess would come a couple years later as we heard news of a brand new Zelda game releasing for the Wii and GameCube, and obviously that game being none other than The Legend of Zelda: Twilight Princess. I also have an embarrassing confession to make. Yes, we skipped Wind Waker. I know, I've never actually played Wind Waker all the way through, like not even close. I know. Stay with me. Feel free to unsubscribe. I deserve it. I know I'm a fake Zelda fan, but that means I just get to play it and make a nice long video about it. So hey, that'll be fun. Plus, I know all of you Wind Waker fanboys are super jealous that I'll get to experience it for the first time. Anywho's, we didn't have a Wii or a GameCube to play Twilight Princess on, but there was no way we were going to let a new Zelda game release and not play it, especially after seeing how realistic it looked for the time. An older, more mature looking Link which almost mirrored my own age, as I was so young during our Ocarina of Time adventure. Although I was only 10 when this game released, we didn't actually play it until later, so I was a soon-to-be teen during our playthrough. Now, graphically speaking, Twilight Princess obviously wins with what is still my favorite iteration of Link. As much as I glaze Ocarina of Time, Twilight Princess dang near equals it for me on a personal level, regardless of its positives or negatives. No, I don't have quite as much nostalgia for it, but it's pretty close to the same. Also, the fact that I was a little bit older, I could process more of the story and themes than I did in Ocarina of Time. And as far as gameplay goes between these two games, as much as I might hate them now, I actually love the motion control based combat. I had never felt more like Link himself. I had more actual fun playing as Link in Twilight than I did in Ocarina. From the moment I first stepped into the vast fields of Hyrule, my tiny little donut mind was yet again blown. The expansive landscape begged me to explore every corner from the calm, cozy Ordon village to the dark depths of the Twilight realm. I still remember the thrill of riding Epona across the grassy plains, blasting what is quite possibly the best rendition of the Hyrule field theme ever put to screen to this day. Man, I miss dedicated bombastic location themes in the Zelda franchise, as I embarked on quests that felt both grand and deeply personal. Except for this one, screw this mission and every escort mission in any video game ever. But the world was alive, filled with secrets waiting to be uncovered, and every new area brought a mix of excitement and curiosity. Akin to Ocarina of Time, the game encouraged exploration, although this time the world striving for a darker, more realistic depiction, making the personal stakes feel even bigger. Each interaction with the environment felt meaningful, a connection to a world brimming with lore and history, filling my little brain with endless ideas and thoughts about how this game connected to its predecessors. The blend of light and dark, as well as the transformative journey from the sunlit fields to the shadowy realm of the Twilight, left a permanent mark on my imagination. The characters of Twilight Princess also played a huge part in making our experience with this game so memorable. Link, yet again the silent hero, embodied the spirit of adventure, but it was Midna who truly captured our hearts. Her initial sassiness and sharp wit gradually gave way to vulnerability and depth. The evolving relationship between Link and Midna resonated with me as I witnessed her transformation from a mysterious ally to a loyal friend, as you yourself as the player also grew closer to her. Twilight Princess absolutely blows Ocarina of Time out of the water when it comes to companions. Midna is infinitely better than Navi, and I'm not even a Navi hater. Honestly, I love her, but you can't even compare the two. Plus, when you finally see her in her true form, I mean, shoot, but stop it. Not to mention this game is kind of what formed my preferences in women, but you know what, let's keep going. But seriously, it's about time we make Zelda companions great again. Princess Zelda's role also left a lasting impression. Her quiet strength and determination in the face of darkness was inspiring, reinforcing the idea that heroism comes in many forms. This version of Zelda always wins in my opinion, as she has more to do and feels like an actual character, rather than someone you just run into once in a while like in Ocarina of Time. The game's exploration of themes such as sacrifice, friendships, and redemption created a narrative that was not only engaging but also profoundly relatable. And again, we cannot make a video glazing the Zelda franchise without talking about the music of the series. I know I've already touched on the music in Ocarina of Time, but I just have to reiterate the music in these games is so goddamn delectable. You don't need me to tell you how good it is. If you're watching this video, you already know. Songs like Ordon Ranch's theme, Zora's Domain, the Faron Woods theme, Zelda's Lullaby, and many others are literally engraved into my soul. And chances are you feel the same way with many of these songs. Or maybe for you it's music from other games. The point is, the music from Twilight Princess dang near played just as big of a part in creating great memories as the gameplay itself did. And the music in both of these games, I mean, I really don't know if I could pick a favorite. If I had to choose, I would probably say Ocarina of Time just for the atmospheric aspect of it, while Twilight Princess's soundtrack excels in being a bombastic and epic soundtrack. I just literally can't imagine a timeline where I didn't play Zelda, man. It's such an integral part of who I am and what made my childhood so amazing and memorable. I would do anything to turn back the clock and not take a single moment for granted. And to be honest, I actually don't think the tones of these games are too different from one another, just I think Twilight Princess pushes it further when it comes to darker tones. Which is interesting because I would think that that would lead to a more atmospheric feel, but in my opinion, Ocarina is actually more atmospheric. I mean, the Forest Temple alone is possibly the most atmospheric location in all of gaming history. I don't know, I'm being a fanboy, but come on. The only area in Twilight Princess that I feel rivals it or equals it is the Twilight Realm. I mean, this place might as well be the backrooms of the Zelda franchise. Zelda actually just recently made a video not too long ago, so you should go check that out. I'll put it down in the description. But as far as the dungeons go, I'm gonna catch some smoke for this one, but I absolutely think that Ocarina of Time's dungeons are not as good as Twilight Princess's dungeons. As much as I love Ocarina of Time, and as much as I love the dungeons, apart from maybe the Forest Temple, the Spirit Temple, and the Shadow Temple, which are three of my favorite dungeons of all time, overall, I think I enjoy Twilight Princess's dungeons more. I think they're more in-depth, I think they're longer. I don't know, I just think the atmospheres are, while not quite as atmospheric as Ocarina of Time, are still very atmospheric, and when you mix that with the puzzles and the extensiveness of them, I just think they win. I mean, Arbiter's Grounds and Snow Peak Ruins alone are two of the, I do have some serious nostalgia for those two specific dungeons. I don't know why. And I also much prefer the Water Temple in Twilight Princess. Now, maybe that's because the Water Temple in Ocarina of Time gave 10-year-old Milky a stroke, but I just think it's a better laid out temple, in my opinion. But yeah, for the most part, I think I prefer, when you take nostalgia out of the picture, which I'm really trying to do, I think that logistically speaking, Twilight Princess's dungeons are better, I think. I will let you know again when I play both of these games, but when I'm going off of memory alone, at least for me, I remember enjoying Twilight Princess's dungeons more. And that may be just because I was older when I played that game, so that could be a reason as well. I would actually like to do an in-depth video about the dungeons in both of these games, whether I do a comparison video or I just specifically focus on one game, which is probably what I would do, just so I could actually go in-depth. Because this video isn't a super in-depth comparison, I'm just kind of going over my personal feelings between the two games. But I would really like to make a video just going over each dungeon in both games, so let me know down in the comments if that's something you'd be interested in. But as far as giving a definitive answer on which game is better, I really don't know if I can. I guess if I had to make one of the two games disappear from our timeline, I would probably keep Ocarina of Time because of how much it means to me, but that doesn't necessarily make it better. And like I said, no, this wasn't a super in-depth comparison. It was more of what these two games mean to me and how much they mean to me, and I do see these games as being somewhat as surrogate brothers in a way. They're both in my top 3 favorite Zelda games, and both bring amazing things to the series. And on a quick side note, Tears of the Kingdom was the first Zelda game I didn't play with my grandpa. He was still alive but older and also lived in my home state of Iowa as I live in Florida. And unironically, Tears of the Kingdom is the only Zelda game that I've ever been disappointed with. Now, I'd like to think that most of my criticisms with that game are legitimate, and I would say that they are, but I also can't help to think that I would have had a better time if it was with my grandpa. As a matter of fact, I know I would have had a better time. Now, I'm by no means excusing the issues that I have with this game because I think it's too open world, at least its dungeons and puzzles. I think it's too similar to Breath of the Wild. I also don't think it holds a candle to Breath of the Wild when it comes to exploration, or even just as being as good of a game. Even though it's way bigger, it feels too familiar and empty to me. Again, comment below if you'd like to see a video of me comparing those two games. I wish we would have played every Zelda game together. But life moves on, people grow up, and you have to deal with adult responsibilities. Everything seems so innocent and easy when you're a kid, but then one day you're suddenly thrown into a big scary world. There was a time when you were hanging out with a childhood friend, not realizing it would be the last time you'd ever play with them. Or playing a game with your dad, not realizing it would be the last time you'd ever play that game together. We're all forced to grow up, whether we like it or not. And well, maybe that's what Ocarina of Time was trying to teach us all along. Sometimes life gets hard and you find yourself in a dark place, and maybe that's what Twilight Princess was trying to tell us all along. The point of this video isn't to be mopey and sad that we're all grown up now, or that I can't play Zelda anymore, because that's not the case at all. It's meant to be a celebration of an amazing series that played a huge role in my grandpa and I's relationship. The Zelda series will continue on, and I will continue to love and cherish it. Sure, it'll never quite be the same, but it'll be even more impactful now. And man, I pray that the Zelda movie is good, because I had always dreamed about taking my grandpa to see a live-action Zelda movie. Even long before it was announced, we always talked about a Zelda movie. Either way, I'm gonna have a tear in my eye while watching a movie that I've waited my whole life for. And this time, I'm gonna be watching it by myself. I'm excited for the future of the franchise, and I pray that it remains as legendary as I've known it to be my entire life. And with all that being said, my little glazers, that is why the Legend of Zelda series is my favorite series of all time. But what game do you prefer? Ocarina of Time, Twilight Princess, Wind Waker, or maybe it's not even a Zelda game? Let me know down in the comments below what game you have a special connection to. And again, this video wasn't meant to be sad, it was just meant to be a celebration and to tell you guys why this series means so much to me. Because I do make a lot of Zelda videos and I've never really gone into why I love Zelda so much, so I figured I'd make a video about it, especially after my grandpa's passing. It was just kind of a thing out of respect I wanted to do. But go ahead and subscribe to become a guardian of the glaze, and I'll see you next time on the Milky Donut.